rate of return should not be all you're considering when you are looking at an investment, an advisor, a financial vehicle. Today, we look at why. Hello, I'm Daniel McCluskey, and I help people align their beliefs and their actions when it comes to taking control of or being responsible for their financial future. If you would do me a favor at the end of this video, leave a comment below. What was helpful? What made sense? What questions do you have? It would really help out. Thank you and enjoy the video. I had a conversation with a friend earlier this year who came to me asking some questions on his whole portfolio and kind of maybe what he should do or how he should diversify. I asked him many questions, he asked me many questions, and one thing that he was sure to highlight was that in the app he was using to invest some of his money in mutual funds, stocks, and bonds, he had it set on the most aggressive strategy. He showed me that and used that to assure me, basically saying, hey, I'm not really concerned about risk tolerance or if something's more risky or not. I'm willing to take way more risk now while I'm younger and try and get bigger returns while I can afford some loss. I don't really care anything about the risk tolerance. I just want to look at what the highest rate of return is. So what I say, and I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, okay, well, why don't you look at crypto coins, for example? They might average the highest rate of return. You could probably just go over there, for example. He says, I don't know about those. Those kind of seem like a scam. They're too risky. They're really volatile. Okay, so you do have a risk tolerance. Well, yeah, I guess I do. I don't want to go that risky. I could have continued to ask him a series of questions. He gives a series of answers, and we really could have pinpointed what his actual risk tolerance is. From there, I could have asked him a series of questions to consider some other things. For example, the tax implications. He might have a higher rate of return here, but this one might save him on some taxes. Is that something he's considered? Rate of return right now might sound good, but has he considered the rate of return after he's pulled it out for taxes, done some tax planning? Has he considered that? And from there, since he has his own business, for example, I could have asked him if the main goal is maximizing his wealth later on, if liquidity, for example, would be important to him. Like, hey, I know you have your businesses. If some opportunity did come up where you did need money, is that something you would want to have available to be able to pounce on? Because, of course, me and you both know the highest return you would get on that money is on yourself or your business, much more compared to any sort of investment where we might get, let's just say, between 5 and 15%. He says, well, yeah, of course, that would definitely be something that I want to have. And I could continue to go on, of course. The main thing to get from this story, though, is that a lot of people go looking and just say, what vehicle can I find that gets me the highest rate of return? Ooh, these have averaged 12% over the last 10 years. I'm gonna get those. These have averaged 15%. I'm gonna get those. There's other things to consider. Now let's kind of get into all of that and why those things are now. First is that if people really did only care about rate of return, they wouldn't probably be looking to invest their money in the stock market. They'd probably all have startups. They'd probably all have cryptocurrency because those can all actually produce or have higher rates of returns over time if funded and worked at hard enough. But people don't want to do that. Another super easy example that I'll give people is, let's say I come up to you to flip a coin. I say, all right, here's the deal. And let's assume that you're worth $5 million. You've worked your whole life, you've saved up, you have this $5 million nest egg. And I say, here's the deal. If it lands on heads, you give me your $5 million. If it lands on tails, I'll give you $20 million. Well, here's the thing. If you lose all of that money, you have nothing. Now, if you were able to flip that coin infinite times, you would average 7.5 million of earnings every single time you flipped it. Your rate of return in that case on your $5 million is 150%. Well, even though it's exponentially larger, for example, 10% you might get somewhere else, you still wouldn't do it. Why? Because if you lose the $5 million, you have nothing. It's not a risk you're willing to take. There is other things that need to be considered other than just the rate of return or the expected value, for example. Now, I could go deep into liquidity, why that's important for if you do have an opportunity or an emergency comes up, or I could go into tax-free, for example, and why that's important in case tax rates were to rise, or safety, and why that's important in case the market continues to crash, or buying and holding doesn't work like it did in Japan, for example. If you bought and hold since 1990, you are down money from 35 years ago. I could go into all of that. But what I really want to get into is the type of rate of return you should be looking for. And this does vary based on vehicles and how frequently you are putting money in. But generally, it's going to be your compound annual growth rate if you're not putting any more money in. Or in most cases, what I like to look at is not just your rate of return, but your internal rate of return, your IRR. Truly, if you just use internal rate of return and never use compound annual growth rate, that's fine as well. I'm going to keep this very short, sweet, and easy to understand, so stay with me. Average rate of return. If you, for example, had $100,000 in an account right here, and you gained 100%, now you have 200,000. And then next year you lost 50%. Now you're at 100. Next year you gained 100%. Now you're at 200. Next year you lost 50%. You're at 100. Well, what's your average rate of return? You averaged 100, then you went down 50, up 100, down 50, up 100, down 50. Your average rate of return, 25%. Your compound annual growth rate, 0. Why? Where you started is where you ended up. So even though you might average 25% on that particular investment, well, your compound annual growth rate was 0. You didn't actually make anything. So how much you average is not the number to look out for. Now, one thing about the compound annual growth rate is that assumes you put in that $100,000 and then you looked at the last day and you kind of calculated it from there. Your beginning balance and your ending balance. The problem is, well, in most cases, we're not just putting one amount of money in something and never putting more money in. Ideally, we're continuing to work, we're continuing to fund it. Sometimes we might take out a little bit. So in this case, the compound annual growth rate calculation needs to be a little bit more complicated. That is where internal rate of return comes in. So with an indexed universal life, for example, it might show you, hey, you're going to average on this illustration, we're going to show you 6.3%. You might think, all right, I'm going to put money in and it's going to grow at 6.3%. Well, if you turned on the internal rate of return report and then scroll down to the bottom, it'll show you based on each year what your internal rate of return is at that point. Yes, you might have gained 6.3% interest, and that was what the illustration showed all these years. But you did have some cost of insurance you had to pay. You did have your commissions that go to the agent. So not 100% of your money actually went to the cash value account. Therefore, your internal rate of return, accounting for all those fees, would show you, hey, it's not actually the 6.3, but it's this number here. And that is the number that matters the most. So when you're looking at a vehicle, when you're looking at an investment, look at the internal rate of return, not just the compound annual growth rate, not the average especially, but the internal rate of return. That's going to give you the number you need to see. If you do want to learn more about IRR, how to see your policy's IRR, why your agent should be showing you your internal rate of return, that is exactly what my next video will be on. Make sure to subscribe and I will see you there.